Well, when I was a little boy, 5 years old, I was out in the square playing, and Uncle Bob came along and said, Edward, do you want to go with me to the journal office? Well, I wanted to go with Uncle Bob anywhere. So we went up to the journal office, and in the newsroom or the editorial room up on the third floor, I heard a noise going along. And I said, Uncle Bob, what's that noise? And he said, let's go see. So we went down into the basement, and there was a huge whole printing press spewing out copies of the journal so fast you couldn't possibly count them. Well, I'd never seen anything like that before. That was really something. Uncle Bob got the message, and Christmas gave me a printing press, and I was hooked for life. Well, I began setting type. My dad, who was president of the college, Salem College then, had set type when he was a boy, so he was able to show me how. This was just a rubber type in a little cylinder press. And I began setting it. And then I learned about letters. And particularly that you needed two letters sometimes to make one sound, like choo-choo, because I was interested in trains, of course. All boys were. And chew, the ch was ch, and the oo was oo. And I knew that all right, and I could write choo-choo and print choo-choo, for that matter, with type. It was great. And then when I entered school next year, or half a year from then, the first page on the first reader showed a chair on a porch and two bluebirds on the back of the chair. And the words were this. Now listen to this. Look, look, Ruth. Two bluebirds flew in. Now think about that for a moment, because that confused me. I knew that oo meant ooh. And when Miss Emma said, look, look, I knew something was wrong there, because those two O's weren't oohing as they should be. And then Ruth, that had an oo in it, didn't have oo in it. Flew didn't have oo. Blue didn't have oo. Bluebirds flew. Yes, that's Ruth. Two didn't have oo. It had one O, but not two of them. Look, look, Ruth. Two bluebirds flew in. Well, I knew something was wrong, but first grade, maybe they didn't know any better. Miss Emma was just teaching first grade. Second might be better, but it wasn't. They didn't know any better in second grade, and so I kept looking for them to get things straightened out. But they didn't. Of course, when Latin came in 8th grade, it got straightened out. But I was having trouble right along there, because I knew that letters should represent the sounds that you heard in words, but they didn't. Well, I eventually learned to spell by memorizing every word, like a great many people did, but of course there are those who do not and have real trouble with it. Well, many years later, in fact, on July the 31st, 1961, I read in the New York Times a headline that said something about a Q-less alphabet, an alphabet that did not have Q in it. And this described the initial teaching alphabet, ITA, that was Pittman's idea and was being put into the Bethlehem schools. Well, now that interested me particularly because Bethlehem is where I was born, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and Pittman, James Pittman, who had worked out this new alphabet, had gotten the necessary funding and so forth to try it out in the Bethlehem schools and elsewhere. But Bethlehem was written up particularly. But this alphabet that they were showing had new characters in it, 16 new letters in it. Now they were combinations of CH as the ch sound, SH, NG, and other combinations of letters. And it seemed to me silly to run those combinations together, whereas you could just learn that SH was SH and CH made the sound ch, just as I had learned for choo-choo, and OO made the oo sound, and all the other NG and everything else. If you just remembered that the pair of letters made a single sound. That was perfectly easy. And I couldn't see why in the world these letters had to be hooked up together in order, and they made, I was in the typographic business by that time, and it made a terrible typographic looking letters. Well, I made a little talk for the Type Directors Club and let it go with that. That was 1961, I think, 60 or 61. And forgot all about it after a while because, however, ITA went on, but I didn't know it, and it was used in quite a number of schools. And some children, I understood, worked very well. It worked very well for them. They eventually got out of it, got to normal reading, which Pittman said could be done very naturally. I later learned that was the downfall of the thing. There was no way out. That for some could make the change, others simply didn't make the change properly and were in trouble. And of course, I have gone to Bethlehem since then and talked to some of the people that learned that way, and it's very interesting. Some of them said it was very good. Others said, oh, they had a lot of trouble when they changed out. So that has been interesting that I happen to have that connection as well as the Winston-Salem connection. All right, time went on. And then in 1969, our grandchild, one of our grandchildren, Chris, who was brought up in Mexico, came to visit us. And we went out canoeing on the Croton and Hudson rivers. And after we ran out of things to say, I said to Chris, you're 8 years old, aren't you? And Chris said, yes. And I said, does that mean third grade in a Mexican school? He went to the regular Mexican schools, not the English. Of course, at home he used English. But he went to the regular Mexican schools. He was bilingual. And he said, yes. And I said, what are the subjects in a Mexican school? And he said, well, we have reading and writing and arithmetic and geography. And I said, spelling? He said, no, we don't have spelling. Well, I said, of course you do. You have to have spelling. You couldn't read the letters. You wouldn't know what the letters mean. How do you learn what the letters mean if you don't have spelling? And he said, at the beginning of the year, the teacher tells us the sound of all the letters and pairs and letter pairs, and then in a couple weeks, we can read and write anything we can say. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't imagine. That was a brand new idea to me. But I paddled him back, and the next day I went to the big New York library and looked up dictionaries of other languages, not English, but this is a French dictionary, a Russian dictionary, and a German dictionary. And none of them had pronunciations in them like we do. Their word, the French, because they wanted to represent Parisian pronunciation, did have some pronunciation, but none of the others had pronunciations. Well, here I was, 60-some years old, and hadn't realized that, and was waking up to this thing. Well, from then on, I said, lo and behold, if people in other languages don't have to go through this awful business that we do, why should we? Of course, I should have known better, because I was in for trouble. But I began then to look into a different ways to write things. And I got Lindgren's book from Australia, in which he feels that every short E should be written E, as in lead. Lead. Well, leads, both leads would be the same way. Let's think of another, what is a good word that has any? Should be E-N-Y, not A-N-Y. Of course it should be. Many should be M-E-N-Y. And Lindgren had about 200 words that he thought should be changed. And I wrote to Lindgren then. We didn't have email in those days, and we had to write, but I wrote to him, and he and I wrote a lot back and forth, and he was all for getting that into the Australian schools, and the Australian schools agreed to do it. That was the amazing thing, but of course they didn't do it. They agreed to, but then when the time came to do it, they decided not to do it. So, but this was a beginning idea, and it seemed to make sense. This was what Lindgren called step one. And of course, some people were asking, what's the next step? And he said, let's get step one first. Now, step one is all right, but not completely all right, because in a word like measure, MEASURE, if you're going to keep that the same way, if you're just going to change the EA to E, measure, like Lindgren did, then the time's going to come when you're going to have to change it for the S, which is really the ZH sound, measure. And then on the end, you're going to have to change it a third time. The jure at the end, sure, measure, which is URE and will have to be ER. So that throws a monkey wrench into this partial changing business. And I kept thinking about that a lot and so forth. And then somehow, and I've been trying to remember how this was, I got hold of what Rippman had done, and I think somebody before Rippman had done the same thing. Rippman published a dictionary, but I didn't know about that dictionary till later. But his idea was that the long vowels, which are our worst problem, should be written, the sounds A, E, I, O, U should be written A-E, E-E, I-E, O-E, U-E. And if you do that, actually, the rest of it comes pretty normally if you write words the way they sound. And of course, I had good background in the sounds of words, because when I had choo-choo as a little boy, I had all the other sounds. Gradually, I accumulated all the other sounds. And I began to wonder at that time if it wouldn't make more sense for parents who are so proud when a child comes in and says, that is M-I-L-K. If the parents taught the child to say, this is M-I-L-K, because that's what it really is. It's not M-I-L-K. That's just an artificial thing that we've done. It's M-I-L-K. And if children began to learn these shapes as representing the sounds of the shapes, not the letters, which in a letter like W has no relation at all to its sound, wouldn't that be a much better kindergarten start or home start than what we're doing now? And telling a child that this is the letter M, and the letter M sounds This is the letter I, and the letter I sounds I. This is the letter L, and the letter L sounds L. This is the letter K, and the letter K sounds sounds k, just k. Now, we better think about that, because that's the kind of change that might be very good for kindergartens and parents that were beginning their children. Well, let's see where we are. Well, we got to 8th grade, and of course, in those days, you had to take Latin in 8th grade. And there again, it made sense. It made sense. And later, with French and German, French, you had to learn a few things. EAUX meant O. You could learn that and a few other things. German was wonderful, because German was right on the nose. But one of the interesting things that I learned in college, when I took German, and then I began thinking back, and in French, and in German, and in Latin, they never taught you to spell. Never to spell. This was before I'd met my grandson, of course, but I wondered why they didn't teach you to spell, but you were always able to write the words. I never had any trouble in Latin writing the words, if I knew the words. Usually I didn't know the words. I wasn't a good student. And the same for French, and very much so for German, because it's written like it sounds. Well, let's see. I'm getting off the track here, I'm afraid, but you're doing great. But all right. Then we're talking about the canoe ride with Chris, and going into the library and discovering that other languages are written as they sound, and that was great. And then somehow or other, and I don't remember exactly how, I got hold of this idea. It wouldn't have been from Lindgren, because I had the Lindgren step 1 with short E for any and many and so forth. And up until 1971 or 72, it was that somehow I got hold. Oh, I know how it must have been. Sure, it was ITA, Initial Teaching Alphabet, certainly. That was where we got the AE, and just doing them in sensible letters, not this crazy thing which Pittman did. Actually, Pittman did it so he could get a copyright. And you can't copyright typefaces. Did you know that? No, you can't copyright a typeface. But Pittman could copyright the ITA alphabet, and he was interested in, it's not nice to say this, but he was interested in commercializing the thing, and with a copyright he could do a much better job of commercializing it than without a copyright. So I began to do ITA without making those extra letters, just using SH for the 2 letters SH without hooking them all together and that kind of stuff. And I got out a brochure. I I called the organization, which wasn't any organization, the Typographic Council for Spelling Reform, and I had it headquartered in the organization that I was with, Photo Lettering. It was in a good location, 45th Street, New York, and that looked very nice. 216 East, 45th, New York. Well,
Photo lettering.
Photo lettering. Yes, that was my real career. Photo lettering, changing a three-dimensional typesetting to a two-dimensional. No more metal blocks and things like that. We originally photographed, built the machine in Rutherford, New Jersey, between 1933 and 36. That would photograph one letter after the other, and that was really my career. And we couldn't sell the machines. When we got the machines built, Harold Horman and I did this. Harold was the real genius. He was a wonderful person, marvelous person, and he was both a mechanic and an artist, and I'm a ham at both. But he and I worked this whole thing out and had the machines built at the Rutherford Machinery Company in New Jersey, and but were unable to sell them in Depression years. This was mid-1930s, and so we got backing and opened up our own place. We didn't own it because the fellows that gave us the backing did, but that was all right. We had a wonderful time there. We had lots of fun and had many marvelous customers. All the advertising agencies used us rather than hand lettering. I wonder if we ought to show one of those plates that we use. Would you get it down from the top of that? You can go over there and get up to the top on that cabinet. Just lift it up. It's glass. It's high up there. It's glass. Yeah. Pick it up carefully so you don't break it. That's it. Give it to me, and I'll demonstrate. This is one of the original photo lettering plates that we made in Rutherford in mid-1930s. It has letters on it, and you actually set type with this by moving from one letter to the other, photographing it in a very precision operation. Now you can make small letters from this photographically. You can make large letters. You can squeeze them, make them narrow, wide, oblique them more, back slant them, do anything you want. You never run out of type, and you don't distribute it after you're through with it. It's you never run out of type, and this is the Rutherford photo lettering machine. It's in the Smithsonian now, and that was the first machine, the first breakthrough from three-dimensional, the lead typesetting. All right.
Excellent.
You can put it back, but
all of the photo-optical printing processes that would come later, and screen printing and what have you.
What?
The screen printing and photo-optical printing all were descendants of this.
They were all descendants of that. That was the first two-dimensional, other than the typewriter. But the typewriter was no good for reproduction.
Right.
But this was this did reproduction. Am I doing the right thing here?
Yes.
You're doing awesome.
All right.
Yeah, you're doing good. I wanted to touch on that before
Sure, sure, fine. Uh, uh, well, this is not the story of photo lettering. That's another story.
No, I know,
But
it's part of your story. That's part of where this comes
all
from.
right.
Here you are working with letters,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's part of
yeah.
you
Well,
know, thinking about letters. How can I combine them? How can I do things with them? It's all part of exercising your brain into what would come later.
that's right. Well, then I began in photo lettering. I set up a little thing that I called the well, I said it earlier. I can't remember what it was. It doesn't matter. At any rate, I put out a brochure using ITA's principle for long vowels of A, E, 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 I, E, O, E, U, E, and using them in paired letters, not hooked up in a crazy way or anything else. Just paired letters, like I learned, choo choo, CH and OO, long ago. And anybody, when he sees two O's together, can know that means ooh. And you've got to do something about words like good, which are not good, or look, which is not OO, like Miss Emma had in first grade. However, I then got out a brochure of this thing, and Dr. Dewey, Godfrey Dewey, in 1973, saw that brochure and knew that I was on the right track. So he wrote me a nice letter. He had been president of the Phonemic Spelling Council. That's a big name, Phonemic Spelling Council. But he had retired from that because he was over 80 years old and his eyes were not good at all anymore. But he was very interested in this whole thing. Let me tell you about Dr. Dewey, who he is. Dr. Dewey, Godfrey Dewey, is the son of Melville Dewey, Melville, Melville Dewey. And Melville Dewey was the head, I don't know whether he was president or what it was, but he was head of the New York State Library Association in the 1900s, and particularly up in 1912 and so forth. And he, being head of all New York libraries, was interested in improving reading. And he knew that the big bug to reading was the way we wrote letters, the ridiculous spelling of English. So he, along with others, and I don't know who all those others were, took hold of a group that was established in 1876 by the American Philological Association to reform English spelling. That group never had much success with it, but it had died down somewhat. But Dr. Melville Dewey took hold of that with some other people. And they said, now what we've got to do is to do two things. We've got to raise enough money to support reformed spelling, and we have to get people that are enthusiastic about it. So what they did was to build Lake Placid Club, and it's there today. The inn is there today, and they built that to attract teachers in the summer and get them interested in reformed spelling. My wife's sister's husband, Ed Priest, had a job there when he was a boy, and he could remember that the menus and everything else were written in reformed spelling in the Lake Placid Club. So they tried that thing and didn't have much success with it, of course. I guess at that time they did not know about the EEIEOEUE, although I have heard that had been proposed as early as 1910, and I even heard it might have been proposed earlier than that. But I don't think that they were advocating that. I don't know what they were advocating. But at any rate, Lake Placid Club became the headquarters for reformed spelling. And after Dr. Dewey died, Dr. Melville Dewey died, his son, Godfrey Dewey, took over the project. And he ultimately, well, there's a long story there, but he ultimately became president. He probably organized it of the Phonemic Spelling Council. All right, Dr. Dewey in 1973 somehow got hold of this brochure that I had put out, and I'll give you a copy of that if you want it. He saw, here's something that makes sense again. So he wrote me a letter inviting me up in autumn. It was June, and yet the trees were so beautiful there. When I drove up, I'll always remember the red trees. How could have that been in June? Maybe, well, maple trees are red, aren't they, in summer too? Well, it was a beautiful drive up there. And I came into Lake Placid Club, the old club with wooden stairs and all the things that were originally built in 1912 was when they built it. And as I came in, I saw a very, very distinguished looking old man leaving the desk and going upstairs. And I thought that must be a Dr. Dewey. And I learned at the desk that it was. Now the club, the inn now had given Dr. Dewey a room on the balcony to carry on his work. And so I went up to him, and we had a wonderful afternoon, that afternoon and the next day, talking about spelling. He felt that I was on the right track, and that so many others and let me say right now, and let me underscore this, please, because I have done nothing at all for spelling reform. I've simply copied what other good people have done. One of the troubles with spelling reform is that everybody wants to have their way, the way. Everybody wants to invent it. I even got a letter from somebody that said that he was a promoter, and if we got together, we could make money out of this thing. Well, that's the last thing in the world that one should be interested in. This is a thing to help people, not to make money with. So Dr. Dewey and I had a wonderful afternoon, and that night I was in Lake Placid and saw him again in the morning. I went to his home and had a dinner with him. He was living with his daughter, and she was interested in the whole thing too. She was wonderful. I think both of them are no longer living. I'm sure Dr. Dewey isn't. He went to England and died there. He was about 80 years old when I saw him and had to use a strong magnifying glass to read anything. But his mind was good, a wonderful mind, a great mind. Well, in New York, there was the Phonemic Spelling Council, of which he had once been president, but had turned the presidency over to Emmett Betts, with an S on it, Emmett Betts, who was not a good president. Emmett, again, was interested in publishing books, publishing primers, and wanted to make money. It was just too bad. But that council, the Phonemic Spelling Council, had on it some excellent people. Park Beck was one. He was in City College. Ben Wood was another. Ben Wood was the inventor of the SAT scoring. And there are lots of stories about that I could tell. But when you go to the Educational Testing Service in Princeton, and they know Ben Wood, they roll out the red carpet for you there, because he was the one that established that whole thing, and he was the inventor of the SAT scoring, as I have said. There are lots of stories about that Ben told me. Ben, strangely enough, lived in Croton. He lived up on the Post Road. He and his wife, Grace Wood, and they were wonderful people, both of them. And then there was the president of the SAT scoring, of the Educational Testing Service, Bill. It's awful at this age. I can't remember these names, and several other fine people.
This sounds like a
What?
this part of the story of this phonemic, the group that you're describing that came together with Ben Wood and what have you.
Yeah.
Right. This sounds like a second version, a smaller version of what Melville Dewey had done in the 1880s.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Except they were not building hotels.
But what you're also saying is that the group that came together to try to move a phonemic spelling system were also people that were involved in the development of the standardized testing movement in this country.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, and very enthusiastic about spelling reform. And John Henry Martin, do you know him? Yeah, yeah. Could I run upstairs and to get the names of these people?
Sure, if you think that would help, you bet you, or I'll get them for it.
No, you won't know where. Let me run up because I think I ought to do that because much of what I'm going to say has to do with these people.
All right, let's pause and do that.
Could I take this off?
I'm not, no.
Well, all right. Yes. Well, John Henry Martin was the one who did the writing to read a computer program in
Can I ask you something real quick?
what?
I want to hear this, and I'm feeling a lot of glare from your glasses. Do you mind taking them off again? The glasses?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That works so much better. Thank you.
Sure.
So he was the.
Yeah. They glasses do. You want me to go ahead now, or
Sure, you can go ahead. He'll
All
just come back in.
all right? Now, the people in the Phonemic Spelling Council, which is the group that at the dictionary here.
Kind of familiar, but I don't know.
You know what, we do have that.
What?
We do have that.
You do have it. Yeah, I thought so.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine that you didn't have that. All right.
My mistake.
All right. Are we ready to go?
Well, we've got 13 minutes left on this tape. Should we go ahead and switch, or can we go ahead and let's use it for
Let's use this up. Yeah, let's go to 10 and then switch tapes.
okay.
Do you have a time limit on here?
No, she's just saying the tape's gonna run out. We have to change tapes in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in 10 minutes. All right.
But then we can just put it.
We'll put another tape in.
Well, now the people in the Phonemic Spelling Council, which Godfrey Dewey had retired from because he was unable of physically to come to their meetings and so forth. It was held in the offices of Alvin Urick. He was president, and he gave the council very nice offices in his office. He was a consultant for colleges, and this was 585th Avenue, or 685th Avenue, a very elegant address, and I met there. I became a part of that, and the others on it were Ben Wood and John Henry Martin and William Turnbull. Now, William Turnbull was president of the Educational Testing Service in Princeton, and a very fine person. And Helen Bonham Biscard, is that name familiar to you? Well, she's a fine person. She's now in a nursing home in Florida, but she was she was head of training training Denver teachers, and in reading and so forth. And she was a great advocate is a great advocate of what we're doing now. We hear from her every now and then. She supports us beautifully, and we owe everything to Helen Biscard. She's in Florida in a retirement home or a nursing home, I think now. But there is a wonderful person that knows all about it. Then there was Park Beck and Emmett Betts. Emmett Betts was a traitor, but and Abe Citron, who's in Denver today. And let's see, I guess that's about all who came. Aba Tannenbaum, and who was at the Teachers College in New York, and Grace Wood. And they made up this thing. Now, yes. Now, what had happened in 1985 was that this group had fallen apart. It was organized earlier, and but it hadn't had a meeting for a long time. And Park Beck, who knew me because I had given photo lettering, I had given them our alphabet gallery, which we had at photo lettering, to have a meeting there one time. So Park Beck knew me and remembered me, and he called me up and he said, was I interested in reform spelling still? I said, of course I was. And he said, well, our organization has a sort of died out. We're not very active anymore, and I'm wondering about reorganizing it. And he said, Ben Wood lives in your town of Croton. He said, I'd like to come up to see him, but I'd like you to go along with me if you're interested. And of course I was. So Park Beck and I went to see Ben Wood. Oh, this was 10 years after, at least 10 years after I had seen Dewey. And I was just struggling along myself. And so Park came up. I met him at the station, and we drove up to see Ben Wood and Grace Wood. And they were interested in getting it going, and if they had somebody like me who was relatively young and wanted to do things, why that was fine with them. So you see, at that time I was just about 75, and so we reorganized it, and Al Urick gave us the quarters that he had, and we had meetings there, and everything went well. Now you should know about John Henry Martin, because he took the old IBM computers, which IBM was ready to throw away. You remember the ones that they advertised with Charlie Chaplin? That was the first personal computer.
Not the card readers.
That's right. And it used a disk to go with it and all that.
5 1/4 floppies.
What?
Yeah, big floppy disks.
Yeah, floppy disk to go with it, a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk, and IBM was ready to throw those away, and John Henry thought, boy, we can use those things for spelling reform. So he worked out a program that used them, and it was pretty much like what we were doing in general, yeah. A E E E I E O E U E, and he got those IBMs into some Florida. He lived in Florida, into some Florida schools and North Carolina schools. Interestingly enough, because Winston-Salem schools had them. I went there to see them in operation, and they were doing something of a job. They were sold on it. John Henry had worked out the whole system, and he had clay, making letters out of clay and all that. A lot of things that.
A whole system from teaching kids about letters with clay and other physical objects, all the way through using this new spelling system, this sound spell, and then from there transitioning into regular reading.
That's right. That's right. But again, he didn't have a good transition.
Yeah, it always comes down to that.
That's always the catch, the transition business.
Before we leave this part, Ed, I'd like to circle back to another question, if I could.
Yeah.
Okay. It's clear to me that from the other reading, including reading your stuff and other stuff, that Melville Dewey catalyzed a major United States movement of university professors and
Yeah.
luminaries that got Carnegie behind them and so forth, and that all kind of collapsed in the 1906 Theodore Roosevelt mess.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So Godfrey Dewey is his son, and he picks up the intention of how do we fix this thing, even after that one crashes.
Yeah.
And goes on, and it sounds like between 1906 and 1980 something, when you're starting to get involved, and I guess what you're describing now is the transformation of the Phonemic Spelling Council into the American Literacy Council. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you how that happened. It's the same thing, really. We just changed the name because phonemic spelling was so awful.
Yeah, right.
Everybody died in between December 1989 and January 1990. Six people died and left me. And I was the only one left.
Wow.
And Joe Little. We had hired Joe Little.
Joe Little was with the Simplified Spelling Society, right? Up in New York area. Vanessa mentioned it.
No, he's American Literacy Council. Park Beck. No, he has nothing to do with the Simplified Spelling Society. That's all British.
What is Steve Bett works for?
What?
Steve Bett's involved in.
Let me tell you how he came about.
Okay, let's change tapes.
Let me change the tapes and then we'll hear them.
All right. Remembering all these things.
Wonderful.
The lights aren't bothering you too much?
No.
They're not too bad. They're not too hot, huh? For how much light you got? They're not too hot.
No, fine.
Okay. We are back on talking about Steve Bett.
Do some of your interviewees get too hot or too cold or something?
There's some rooms that we function in where we put 4 lights on behind them, in a smaller room, and it can get hot.
You get hot. No.
This is only a 500 watt. We have one of the bulbs for this is a 1,000 watt bulb, and that generates twice as much light and heat.
I see. I'm surprised you don't burn out the fuses.
Well, right, this whole thing here is less than 10 amps.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, you got 500 watts and a 250 and a 200. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Well, apparently they aren't going dead.
Right, right. It's a matter of being careful to not use more light than you need and burn power. Because actually, with Reed Lyon, we had power breakups a lot with Reed Lyon's office at the National Institute of Health. We kept blowing fuses there.
Huh.
That's what ended the interview,
Well,
the last blown fuse.
well, all right. Let me tell you about Joe Little. Let me tell you about Ed Lias first, because Ed Lias is really important. Ed Lias, I knew Ed Lias first in 1961. Ed Lias, strangely, was a minister of a little church, but he was also a physicist and a very you have those books, don't you?
Nope.
Nope. Well, I'll get Joe to send you. He has plenty of copies. These are the only ones I have, but these are Dewey's two books, 1970. They're published by a Teachers College Press.
I'd love to have copies.
Yes, you ought to have those,
Yeah.
because they're very thorough and very good. Although his whole research is based on only 10,000 words, but he did it all by hand, and that's a lot to do by hand. It gives you very good dope in that thing, though, of a word frequency and so forth. The whole thing is very good.
Right. The cognitive scientists have duplicated some of this with, they've got language for the occurrence of frequency of occurrence of different words and different types of genres of writing, and as well as the letter sound confusions and how frequently they occur in different kinds of writings and so forth, right?
That's right.
But
That's
I
right.
love this. What I'm what was that?
Like you just turned your phone off.
I know, but it didn't. It just turned itself off.
And the battery went there.
Probably the battery went dead. Okay. My understanding is that Melville Dewey and his group actually had developed a series of proposed spelling shifts, spelling reforms, and originally had planned to let them develop over time. To get writers of books, magazines,
That's right.
publishers, dictionaries, encyclopedias, all the people that gathered together, and they were going to slowly, it was a multi-generational kind of approach to switching the writing system.
That's right.
And Roosevelt comes in with this big stick, and it turns into a big stink, and it kind of dies there.
Well, now I'm not sure about that, because Melville Dewey, they built Lake Placid Club after Roosevelt's time, 1912.
That was my question. That's what that I heard earlier. My understanding was is that in the 1906 mess, when it went to Congress and all that happened, that the way that the media jumped on it and said it was just a scam by Carnegie to make more money and all of that,
Yeah.
that it created this distaste. It broke up. That Mark Twain, who was at one point an advocate for it, switched and went on to just change the alphabet. He wasn't going to mess with the spelling anymore, and he got really down on Andrew Carnegie about continuing to be concerned with spelling. Right, like the whole thing.
Well, that's what you said the other night.
Well, you can read
Yeah.
Mark Twain's speeches when he's criticizing spelling reform
Yeah.
and saying we got to just change the alphabet, quit screwing
Yeah.
And he's suggesting following Pittman at this point,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So it seems like, and then Bernard Shaw comes along and he's after the alphabet. He's not trying to change the spelling anymore. He's after changing the alphabet.
Yeah.
So it seems like the whole spelling thing went through this, started by Melville in 1880 something, gathers this force in the United States and England, builds up to this point where there's, everybody that's a who's kind of involved in it, and then this thing in the White House, and it all just kind of stumbles down.
Yeah.
And Mark Twain switches, other people switch. There's a little bit of alphabet rumblings, but the spelling movement itself lost huge momentum at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Godfrey Dewey picks up the ball and forms this other thing that you're describing. What was it that they accomplished? What was it that they actually got done after 50 years of working on it, other than writing the books? What was their strategy?
Nothing else got done.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, well, what happened was that in England, of course, you know this dictionary, this Ripman dictionary? That's 1941, during the war, during the Blitz of England, that got printed.
Right.
Dewey gave me that. It was his only copy, and he gave it to me. He said I ought to have that, and he was right.
Right, but whereas, one of the things I liked about the 1880 movement is that they seem to have a strategy of how to shift the world into using it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They had this strategy of not trying to convince the powers to come in and turn the switch, but
Yeah.
rather to bleed it out to get more and more people just using it, adopting it, right, and shifting it in that way.
Well, if you're talking about 1912, when they built Lake of Placid, they built it to have teachers come in the summer and indoctrinate them and work it through the teachers.
Yeah, how many teachers could they handle in the summer?
I don't know.
It seemed like a drop in the bucket to kind of change it.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what Dewey told me. That's all I know.
All right.
And there wouldn't have been any other reason to build Lake Placid.
Well, somebody enjoyed Lake Placid. I don't know about that.
Well, it's a great old building, and it's holding up still.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all the wooden staircases and all that are there today. So they must have done a good job of it.
So let's go forward again. How is it that you were about to mention somebody who said Joe Little, Steve?
Yeah.
How are these people related to the American Literacy Council, and how are they related to these older historical movements?
All right. Let's see now. Yeah. All right. I think I've covered how. Yes, I've told about Park Beck coming up here, and Park and I going to see Ben Wood, and Ben Wood getting Al Urick, and one name I must remember because he was such a fine person, the head of the he's bound to be in here because he's running up. I gave his name a little while ago, and the head of the Educational Testing Service in Princeton, president of it. Renwick, Johnson, Devitt, Betts, York, Wynn, Martin, Turnbull. Bill Turnbull. So I met with them, and then in 1988,
The year before the 6 died.
wait a minute, 1986. Must have been 1986, I think. Park Beck, who was in the revised phonemic spelling council, said we ought to get a young man here who could really promote this thing. Meanwhile, Ed Lias and I had published that dictionary there. And where did we get the money to do it? It cost $3,000. I don't know whether it was our money or not, but
That's an interesting question. I've been wondering for a while who's been putting the money up for these things.
yeah. Al Urick tried to get the University of Washington State to publish it, but they wouldn't do it. But Park Beck said we need a young person to push this thing, to give his whole time on it and push it. So I had written an article in the Moravian about spelling reform. That's a church magazine, and they published it. And Joe Little, strangely enough, in Winston-Salem, had read the article and said, that's what I want to do. And Joe wrote the Phonemic Spelling Council, which by that time had changed its name to, what's the name on the bottom of the cover there? Bad name.
The American Language Academy.
American Language Academy. That's what Al Urick wanted to call it. Bad name. Wrote to them and wanted to know how he could be involved in this thing. And he offered to come up and interview us. And he had graduated, strangely enough, he was from Winston-Salem. And he was graduating from Carolina at Chapel Hill. And he wanted to come up, offered to come up to let us interview him. So Park said, we've got nothing to lose, let's have him come up. And he came up, and here was this young, tall, delightful-looking young chap, just graduated from college, and we decided to hire him. Let's see, I forget what we paid him originally, but at any rate, we hired him at a modest price. Now, this should interest you. When Joe came up, this was 1988, the summer of 1988, right after graduation. I think he came up in June. We housed Joe in the Hexon House here. That's over our garage for 3 months. And I saw Joe every morning. And we went through, I gave him good, solid indoctrination in soundspell. And he could work a computer, and much better than I could at that time. and he got the gist of the whole thing. And then Ben Wood and his wife were given an apartment, a large apartment, because Teachers College felt very highly of Ben Wood, although he was no longer teaching, because he was 90 years old. But they continued to give them an apartment on Morningside Drive in New York, in a building owned by Columbia University. And after Joe left here, after 3 months, they had an extra room in that apartment, and they put Joe in there, although Ben Wood and Grace Wood had moved to Croton meanwhile and had a house in Croton. So Joe pretty much lived alone down there, and it was his job to scour the woods and see what he could do to get spelling reform promoted. And he was very enthusiastic about the whole thing. And they gave him connections with a teachers' college and all that, so he could talk to teachers there and so forth. Well, and Joe went to the schools in New York and proposed this to certain schools and got it used well in one of the night schools in downtown New York among Spanish who were learning English. And
Worst case test with some ESL.
what?
Worst case test
Yes.
with ESL.
Absolutely, and they did pretty well with it. Now I haven't told about Ed Lice in all this, but Ed Lice came to photo lettering in 1961. He dropped in with some very interesting designs that he had made, beautiful cosmographs, which was you might have seen them in that dictionary. I don't know whether we put them in that or not. I imagine we did somewhere in the back. If they were anywhere, they would have been in. No, that dictionary was published before Ed Lice. That's right, they wouldn't be in there. I can show them to you if you're interested. And Ed Lice before long got a job at a college in New Jersey. And he was put in charge of a great big UNIVAC computer. And he and I were very good friends, and I told him about what I was doing, and he thought that was a very interesting thing and offered to have the computer used to that end. And the New York Times wrote up all that we were doing and so forth. We got publicity that way, and then I said, we've got to get out a dictionary. And I contacted Brown University, who had done research. Kuchera was one of the men there who had done research on word frequencies, and they had
Sure,
they had 40,000 words. They'd taken sections, 2,000 sections of from different things.
it's called the Kushera Index to this day by cognitive scientists to talk about the relative frequency of word occurrences
That's
in
it.
different media.
That's it.
They had television, typical newspapers.
Newspaper, yeah, jokes and everything else. And they had done this. So I got in touch with them, and they were simply wonderful. They gave us the tape of these words, and they later worked out the homographs for us too. We were in. I have all their printouts upstairs, and Ed Lice put this whole thing. They gave us the tape, and Ed Lice put us on the computer in Ocean County College. That was the name of the college he was with. It was a junior college, and put it on that computer, and was able to make translations on that computer from ordinary spelling into what we soon called sound spell. Now let's see. By that time, no. By that time, everybody hadn't died yet. This was in the 70s and early 80s, late 70s and early 80s, and Ed became a very good friend. And he is such a wonderful person. He really is. Ed Lice, you just can't beat him. And let's see. We then put together, thanks to Brown University and their cooperation with us, we then put together this dictionary. And I transliterated all the words in the dictionary, 44,000, and used the Random House Dictionary as my source for pronunciation. Now, meanwhile, who was one of the editors of the Random House Dictionary? Well, I'll take a look at it and see. I was such good friends with him. He had called me in when he heard about what we were doing. Maybe I ought to have that name. You want to let me run upstairs and look it up in the dictionary for a moment? Yeah, I think you ought to have that name because, and also one of the editors of the Oxford English, of Oxford American Dictionary, and so he called me in when he saw what I was doing. He called me in the late 70s, and was interested in what I was doing, and some of it turns out that he was working on the Oxford American Dictionary at that time, and some of their pronunciations, notations, might reflect some of the things that we talked about. They're not good sound spell. They ought to be, but he didn't go all the way. But
you're trying to encourage him to use sound spell as the pronunciation guide.
yeah. That's what he was interested in.
Yeah.
And
Built on diacritics from Webster.
the point is that he might have gotten that across, but he talked to me about a year before the dictionary was published. It was published in 1980, and he talked to me in about 79, and it had probably gotten too far to do much about
Too much inertia.
by that time. And of course, he wasn't the only editor either, and he might have had trouble. But I had a pretty good friendship with Flexner and Stuart Flexner, and but the notations, the phonetic notations in the 1980 Oxford American Dictionary are close enough to sound spell so that they would almost work out as it. I have heard that they have gotten out another dictionary and it's all different. So, but this is the 1981, and that when I saw that, I was really delighted to see it. Whether that came accidentally or came from our conversation, I have no idea. And then Flexner died some years ago, so that all these people keep dying all the time. Well, now that was what I was about to tell you, that Joe got going and he got working on Joe Little on the schools. He's a tall, nice-looking guy. You wouldn't look at Lawrence Welk, but do you know what Lawrence Welk is?
I know what he was. Yeah, the conductor, bubble machine.
He what?
The bubble machine, conductor, music.
Yeah. He has a program on that old people look at. Dot and I looked at it, and it's nice. And there's one guy in there who dances, who looks just like Joe Little, for all the world. And well, Joe worked along, and Ed Lice and I worked along, and got out that dictionary, and Ed doing the computer thing because he was a whiz at computers. Now, of course, this was in the old days when computers were all what were they before Windows? We didn't have Windows. DOS. This was all DOS stuff, and I designed the alphabet used in the dictionary there myself because I wanted a good, clear letter, and got it. And one thing I did, which was just my own feeling, in order to differentiate more clearly between P and Q, I made Q a cap at lowercase size, and it works out very well. I think typefaces should do that.
Create more visual distinction.
Yeah. That, and it looks you can't do it with B and D, but you can with a typeface. Oh, what I must say about the Dewey thing, when I met with Dewey, he called me up. He wanted to talk to me because he had always felt that typographers ought to be interested in this and could probably contribute something which those who were not really close to the nuts and bolts of letters would not see. So that I have to say that was when he saw that I was on the right track what he regarded as the right track, and was a typographer also. Why, he
That was part of what attracted him to you, that you were coming from the right place.
coming
Think about this.
from a place that nobody had come from before.
Yeah.
See, nobody, no publisher, no typographic person had shown an interest in this. Their interest had all been from scholarly things and so forth, and he thought maybe the nuts and bolts would help. And I think he waited a long time, but I think double line may be.
Well, it's interesting that this is double line,
It is double line, yeah.
right? I mean,
It,
this is a precursor to double line.
but I didn't get it from that.
No, I know.
Yeah, it is double
I
line.
look at this and go, this is the double line dictionary.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's a double line. Well, this was just a long shot of his, and he hoped that something might come from talking with a typographer.
Well, again, you go back to Ben Franklin. He was somebody who-
Well, sure,
assistant.
there you are.
There he is working with the typographer.
But here was a typographer that was not talking new letters,
Right,
and
right. But he was still dealing with letters in this elemental way.
that's right. Now I should say this: Dewey, when Dewey told me that he went over to Europe to talk to Pittman after Pittman came out with his with ITA. I think it'll be on the tape that I'm giving you. I'm giving you all those Dewey tapes. And I think it'll be on there what we said and what he said. He went to England to get them straightened out on the OO and UU. You know, at one point, and they're still having trouble with this over there, they're calling OO in good. They're spelling good OO. And OO should be for oo sound, for the long oo sound, not the short one. And Dewey, and then even Ripman uses OO for the short one and UU for the long one. In other words, moon is spelled M-U-U-N. And good is spelled G-O-O-D. Good food. And he said they ought to be reversed. And he got them to agree to reversing what Ripman did. And that makes sense. It makes sense because oo occurs 22 million times, 22,000 times in 45,000 words, and the sound occurs 16,000. So you want UU for the least frequent. It just makes sense.
Right, right.
Even
That's
to
his whole system.
even today, those dumb British guys can't see that. They keep emailing me all the time, and they simply can't see. I give them the figures. Doesn't make any difference. They're
Well, I think they probably think that the occurrence frequency isn't itself the ground reference plane for deciding how to do this.
yeah.
You know,
Well,
I mean, it's an important contributor for sure, but I think that they probably think about it differently.
well, I don't know. Rondthaler keeps. I can understand how he wouldn't want to change it for his name. Footer, F-U-U. Well, all right, we've had all that argument. Well, all right, Joe then eventually, oh yes. And then Joe was getting going. Let's see, Joe came here, I think, in '88. And as I said, we housed him next door for 3 months, and he and I used every morning solid for 3 hours, giving him the dope on this whole thing, and he got it and has it completely. He may not show it.
In my conversation with Richard Vinesky.
With who?
Richard Vinesky.
Vinette.
Vinesky.
Richard Vinesky. Should I know who that is?
He wrote the book called The American Way of Spelling that is used by, it is the book of books to the education community in this country about orthography, about spelling.
Yeah.
Okay? He's the one that the president's advisor and the secretary of education,
Oh, yeah.
they go, he's the man,
Uh-huh.
right? He wrote the book, The American Way of Spelling, the structure and origins of English orthography.
Yeah.
American English orthography.
Yeah.
In my conversation with him,
Yeah.
right, he mentioned Joe Little.
Oh, he did.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess Joe Little had really wanted to engage him many times. That he tried to come
Well,
after Vinesky.
Well, Joe was good that way.
Pages.
Yeah. Well, then what happened was that in December 1989, after Joe had been active for a little over a year, in December 1889 and January 1989 and 1990, all the old fellas died, one after the other. Benwood, Park, Beck, the fellow in ETS, and all one after, I think 5 of them died within 3 months.
Wow.
And Joe and I were all that was left. And so the first thing we did was to change the name to American Literacy Council, which made sense, because American, which Al Urick had proclaimed, that the name that's on there, and I couldn't do anything about it because he thought that, what do they call it? American
The Language Academy.
Language Academy. He thought that was a good
So
name.
did these groups raise money and do things, or they just get around and talk?
No, I don't think they raised any money. And Helen Bonham was one of this group, but she couldn't come to the meetings or anything. But she was fine. She knew what we were doing, and she the other and John Henry Martin. He was good too, but he was all for promoting his particular IBM method and so forth, and was not really interested in long range change. However, he was all right, but he eventually had a heart attack in Africa when he went to Africa to install the stuff, and so he died, and one after another died. You pick up a telephone, somebody else had died. So I was left.
You've now so long overlived your peer group. It doesn't happen as much, huh?
It doesn't what?
phone doesn't ring with people dying as much.
No.
The
That,
people that you grew up with are already gone.
that's right. That's right. So, I was interested. Ed Lyas was interested in continuing, and Ed wanted to use computers more in this, and Ed developed an Audible program, which I have. He got the best Audible. He got the one that the telephone company uses on a disc, and I have the disc, and I'll give you one if you want it.
You mean for voice recognition?
Voice recognition, no, for typing a word. There, the program, you can type in a word the way it sounds. It will correct it in English and give you the sound spell and speak the word at the same time. I'll gladly give you that program. They call it the Spell Well program. And he and Joe is Joe at this point is doing other things. I think he has a teaching job. Joe Little, he's still paid a modest amount, and keeps our supplies and answers the 800 number and so forth. And his home is in a good place. He's now married and has 2 children. He married a Japanese girl, and they have 2 children, 2 girls, I think, and he's in Harlem. I think he owns the condominium or something that he has. It's one of those things. I haven't seen it, but after Joe and Ed had great hopes about this new program that they were going to have. And they felt that voice would be the best thing possible on that. My disappointment with the voice is that, well, I'll give you an example. I put in, I typed in when in the course of human events, and it came out when in the course of human events. You couldn't possibly write that events anyway, but IVENTS. It didn't tend toward the E at all. I know it's a schwa, but the schwa could have had an E coloration, and it didn't have that. That disappointed me, and that carried all through the thing. And this is the best Audible. It's the one the telephone company uses and everything else. So they're occasionally selling that. Joe is selling occasional ones.
Yeah, it's on the website.
Yes, I guess it is. And Joe knows all about the website and how to change it and so forth, but we haven't updated it for a long time, and I imagine the website's pretty ancient. I looked at it a year ago, and it looked ancient and not very good, so that we're not. Meanwhile, I have become involved in a double line, which I think has many hopes. I don't think you've seen this. But I had that boy, Leaf Lorenzen, here one summer. He was having dreadful trouble writing, and his mother was very concerned about it, and I said, well, why doesn't Leaf come here for twice a week? Which he did. And by that time, we had the computer going, and Leaf would come for an hour, twice a week, in the summer. And I would talk phonics with him on the couch there for 20 minutes. And then he would go up to the computer and write a story as best he could. And our program would correct most of the errors that he made. This is the program that Ed Lice worked out, and it was very good. We had lots of sloppies, and if you had typed it a sloppy spelling, it would correct it for you right there on the screen. We have that program still, and this.
That's actually part of the way almost everything that Microsoft makes works now.
That's what?
The ability to correct your spelling as you're typing.
Yeah.
That's part. Almost everything that Microsoft makes works that way now.
Is that right?
Yes. Word, Outlook.
I see.
Yeah. So that caught on.
Very good. That caught on. All right. That.
Once you're doing that, once you're doing this autocorrect,
Yeah.
then the pronunciation systems are getting better and better. The voices are getting better and better.
Yeah.
And the voice recognition's getting better and better. And many companies are now emerging that can actually tell the difference in phonemic articulation in children so that they can listen to them struggling to read and then help them with their errors because the computer can actually hear the errors they're making.
Mm-hmm.
So all that's moving its way to helping in the future.
Yeah. All right. That's all good.
Yeah, it is. Ed, we're down to about 11 minutes or so of tape left. We've got
Well,
3 hours. What would you like to get across? And we got two things we want from you in this 10 minutes, okay? One is the little printing thing that you showed us earlier. The little print,
The little mini printing press,
your printing press.
oh,
it's right over there.
oh, that. All right. You want to get it? Sure. I mean, that's.
It was just really neat. I think most people growing up on computers today don't.
Well,
really
that's
have a
right. They
concept
don't
of how
know
those
what this is.
work.
Yeah. Am I on? This is a little printing press in which you set the type. You want to give me that thing that was under it too? That has metal type in it. That little tray under it. Maybe they don't know what type is. I'm sure some people don't. Doesn't seem possible to me. You set type. This is what type looks like. That's a letter Y. It's all backwards because it has to print contact, and the print's all right when it's forward. Here's another letter, and so forth. Type looks like this. Small type looks like that. You set it up in here, lock it up, put a piece of paper on here, and well, you have to ink it first. This is, of course, a child's printing press, the kind we had in about 1915. And then you put a piece of paper on here and squeeze it against the type, a lot like a rubber stamp. And it prints it. Then you put another piece of paper in, print again. You can print as many as you want to. That's the Smithsonian says that that boy printing presses, of which this is one, pretty much ended in the late 1920s. And I noticed to my surprise that there are no boy or girls newspapers being printed. I haven't seen any for a long time. When I was a boy, there used to be lots of them printed. Not every boy was a printer, but a great many of them were, and had a lot of fun doing it. All right.
Excellent.
That's great.
You know, I asked that because until I saw this old PBS video, David would know which one it was. I didn't have a concept.
You
of
didn't.
The printing of the individual.
You might put that
blocks,
in there
the
too.
little letter. I just didn't have a concept of it because it's never been like.
I know.
Just use the computer, right? Just press the button and
Some
it
kids,
comes out.
Well, that's all because
comes from cartons.
of the difference between three-dimensional type and a two-dimensional type. And
Subsequently, the computer.
yeah, and well, on the computer, sure. The computer does it digitally. I never had anything to do with the digital part of it. I did, Xerox got me to unitize one of their digital alphabets when they were just beginning, but I really, and that's the wonderful stuff, because that's what you have on your computer now. I only worked with the photo images, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Just
That was quite an innovation. A massive innovation changed everything.
we had a lot of fun, and photo lettering we really had a good time, and we did jobs for people all over the country. We had at one time we had 2,000 different accounts. people would airmail was reliable then, and we had an arrangement by which if you sent your if you posted it in your post office at a certain hour, and we listed all the hours on a Tuesday, we would have it back in your hands on a Thursday morning.
The Vistaprint of yesterday.
And it worked. It worked. We did that, and I just had loads of fun. Loads of fun. And worked with fine people too. Yeah. Yes.
Ed, you're 99 years old. When are you 100?
What?
What's your birthday?
I'm only 98 now.
98. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, June the 9th. June the 9th. It'll.
So you're right around the corner from 99.
Yeah, just around the corner from 99.
I got it.
Not from 100.
All right.
From a 99. And did I mention to you that Harold Horman, my partner in photo lettering for many years, and I were both born not only on the same day but the same year?
No.
Yeah.
My daughter is married to a man who they have the same birthday, days and months, but not the same year.
So June 9th, 1905?
1905. Yeah, both of us were, but we didn't know it for 2 or 3 years after we began. He and I designed the photo lettering machine in Rutherford. That was in 19. Well,
And that machine's in the Smithsonian?
yeah.
Someday I'm going to go look at that.
I don't know that it's on a display yet, but they have it, and that will be eventually shown as the first step away from three-dimensional printing,
Right.
three-dimensional typesetting.
Right.
Yeah,
It was a great step.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. We certainly had a good time. All right. Fine.
So tomorrow for breakfast, I want to talk to you about the different dimensions of type. You know?
Fine. All right. Then all right. We'll have a type talk.
We'll have a type talk in the morning.
Good. That will be great. Now, yeah, I know I know where I am on that too. And I think I know where I am on reformed spelling. A big point, though, is that the American Literacy Council is not advocating reformed spelling. It's advocating double line, and it's leaving for time to take care of the reformed spelling by introducing it to enough kids with double line.
I agree with the spirit of the training wheels, of getting kids up and letting them move through this rather than
When we get somebody
change the world.
when we get somebody in the White House who has used a double line when they were kids, that'll do the job. And there'll be enough others who have done it, so that they won't get kicked around by the printing. You don't call it the printing office. What do you call it? Government printing office. Yes, yeah, it's a GPO.
Right.
Sure, that's right. You do. Well, it's so wonderful to have you all here.
You too. Is there anything else you'd like to say, or anything you'd say to your family on camera?
To the family.
Or anything?
Anything you want to say to anybody?
Anything you want to say to your family, to your friends, to anyone at all, as we're wrapping up?
Well, of course, the family has been a wonderful family. We had 3 boys, and one of them is in Palo Alto now. The other is retired and has retired to Cedar City, Utah, which is a great place. And it was he who had me come out last August and get an operation on my hip, which they wouldn't do here because I was too old. But my younger sister, 10 years younger than I, is out there, and she had 2 knee operations and very successful. So our son said, Dad, send your x-rays out. We have a man here who can take a look at them, and maybe he'll do it. So he said he looked at them and said, well, if he isn't overweight and has a head on him still, why, I think it'll work out fine. So it did. I walked out of the hospital. and it was great. I say I walked out. I got into the car alone. Let's say that, and I had a good time. I sang well. Maybe you ought to be. You might be interested in having the Ballad of the CCU.
Go for it.
You know what the CCU is? Cardiac Care Unit. I was out at the garage. This is in 1972. I was mowing the grass and washing the car, and Dot called me for supper. And I didn't come right away, which was unusual. And she looked and saw me leaning against the wall there, and she thought something awful had happened to me because this was not like me at all. And she called the doctor, and the doctor felt that I had a heart attack. And he called the ambulance, and they took me into the Cardiac Care Unit, CCU, and hooked me up with all these electronic things and everything. And while I was there, I couldn't do anything else, so I made up the ballad of the CCU. I was mowing the grass and washing the car. I was a little dizzy leaning against the wall. I didn't run pell-mell to the dinner bell. I was just waiting for the second call. But my wife got wind there was something up, and she ran to the telephone. "Oh, Vic, come quick, my Ed, he's sick. Perhaps he'd broken a little heart bone in the ambulance without my pants. Just a little bit of dizzy done it all. Red flashing lights through the middle of the night. Just a little bit of dizzy done it all. The sirens wailed like going to jail. Just a little bit of dizzy done it all. Emergency, take him to floor number 3. Just a little bit of dizzy done it all. Roll him right on through to the CCU. Just a little bit of dizzy done it all. Charming nurses galore running aft and fore. Just a little bit of dizzy done it all. I hear the doctors are coming on the double quick run, and just a little